As soon as I think something, hear something, feel something, I write it down. I usually use my notes on my phone, but I'm writing something and it pops in, I'm just going to write it down. Because the one thing I don't want is for it to transform into something that I didn't envision, right? We're trying to recreate it, and what was it that made me feel that way? And it never works. So I capture it right away. And then I keep a list of potential ideas. Now, they don't always flesh out, and they're not all meant for this moment, but at some point, it's going to come up. So most of the movies I've done, that's what happens. I thought about something. I'm like, what if? And then that small what if becomes a big what if, right? And before you know it, you're putting together a whole script based on those ideas.
Welcome to the latest edition of Adeptus On-Air, and today we have a special guest in Julian Hampton, who is an author, a director, and also a screenwriter. So, Julian, thank you for joining the show.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Awesome, man. Looking forward to getting into some topics. But just for starters, Julian, just tell us a bit about your upbringing, and where you grew up, and how that even led to the path of writing films.
Yeah, so I'm originally from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So I'm from the Midwest, and if you know anything about the weather in the Midwest, you know that there's some great seasons, and there's some seasons that are a little chilly. So that gives you plenty of time to create inside, and I took advantage of that. So my upbringing was pretty pretty different. I've seen a lot of things in my life, some good, some bad, but I allowed those experiences to allow me to tell more stories and to kind of create from there. So as I moved into areas of creation, I started thinking about, writing little cartoons and stories and flip art, and just kept evolving from there to the place where I started writing books, and that just changed everything for me.
Wow, wow, that's awesome. And I've been to Milwaukee a couple times, more so on the road to Green Bay. And
Yeah,
bit of a trip driving from Milwaukee to Green Bay. I mean, you really see the Midwest in terms of
you
uh,
do. You do.
farmland on the
Yeah.
left, farmland on the right. A lot of stuff there. Were there any particular movies or scripts that inspired you growing up as a kid? Anything that stands out? Might have been some of your favorites that you tried to emulate.
Yeah, well, I loved those the different genres. One thing about me is I don't stick with a genre. I like to explore different ones. And when I was pretty small, then we're talking about, of course, cartoons and things like Transformers and uh, yeah, Voltron and all of those type of shows. And that really started things for me, because I'm like, how can I turn something seems is so simple into something that's so complex and such a story. But then it got into things where I was inspired by kung fu movies. I loved kung fu movies, black belt theater, and some of these other things that would come on at night. And even those Sinbad movies, that was a big reasoning for me. So my dad would always take us to this old theater with where they would show Sinbad movies and kung fu movies, and just seeing everything on the big screen gave me so much inspiration. Like, wow, this is huge, and these monsters and this kung fu, and I was just blown away. I was blown away, and it wasn't a reality in my head that I could have my movies playing somewhere like that. It was just more of a fascination where somebody took the time to put this story together and these scenes together and these fights together, and for movies like Sinbad. someone took the time to put these claymations together and to make it believable. And, it's a different world now when you look at it, because technology has come so far. But in those days, I'm thinking, oh my God, this is the most amazing thing I've ever seen. And that kind of took me to the next stage.
That's awesome. I was going to ask you about the next stage. It seems like at that point it was like a wonder, like a fantasy, like wow, this is amazing. At
Yeah.
what point did it become reality for you that I can do this. This is something that I do want to do and can actually make it come true.
Well, I'd say I wrote a story, and it was really a story based in Milwaukee called The Contradiction. And it was basically two sides of a coin, two kids growing up together that took different pathways. And some of the experiences were based on my internal life, but then there was some fascination that were taken just from imagination. And I shared that with some people that I trusted their opinions, and they're like, "No, this is good." Right. I'm like, for real? Yeah, no, this is good. You might want to think about doing something with this. And I took that and really, like any of us, you just need someone that you care about to say you can do this and what you did matters. And that just transformed me into, okay, let's get this done. So I moved into writing my first book, which was that one. Moved into about 4 or 5 more books that I wrote, different stories, a thriller, a book of poetry, another drama. And from there, that's what led me into screenwriting, because I started thinking and looking at it, and I was like, yeah, I love writing books, but I feel like this is something that should be visual. And that took me to trying to learn and understand what screenwriting was. And for anyone who's transitioned from being an author or a novelist to screenwriting, it's a whole different craft,
Yeah.
entirely different.
I can imagine. I mentioned to you before that I spent a lot of time as a sports reporter,
Hmm.
and I understand just the writing process and how different it can be in those different formats. Something I always struggle with, Julian, is I was never able to write funny. Like I just make it translate, in print, and I don't know if I'm a funny person or not, but I just could never like write comedic, just even and sometimes funny things happen in sports, but I was never able to kind of bring it to life in that way. How do you write funny? How do you make it translate to the general audience to make them laugh? 'Cause that's something I was never able to really accomplish.
Well, I don't think the goal is to write funny, because then you're pressing, right? And as someone who's worked in athletics, pressing is probably one of the worst things you can do. I think what you
Yeah.
do is you show the reality of people, because people by nature are funny, right? If you just sat around and watch people, I travel a lot, so I see a lot of funny things going on, plus even funny things with myself. So if you saw me with, trying to somehow manage 6 bags while shooting a text, it, if you write that, it, it's a funny scene. It's a funny situation, but I'm not trying to write it to be funny. It's just a natural. Our humanity is funny because we're flawed, and that's what makes us uniquely great. So what I do is I've always had this thing where I like to put real people in supernatural positions and see how they react. What would you do if? And that's a lot of my storytelling. What would you do if I took you and as a sports writer, right? You already got my mind going. Like as a sports writer, and I said, okay, I'm going to put you in some crazy situation. You're going to be covering the absolute worst team that has ever played, right? Worse than the bad news bear. You're going to be covering the absolute worst. That's funny.
Yep.
You have to sell them as the best team, right? That would be a funny concept. So all of those relationships and how do you spin it and how do you make fans appreciate it by nature, that's going to make people laugh because they're going to think, what would I do if I was in that situation? I got to somehow sell this awful team and make the fans believe that they have hope.
That's
That
awesome.
makes
That's
me
awesome.
laugh.
I love that thought process, and I see how quickly you were able to turn that. And you seem like the type of person that just has ideas in your head at all times. How do you organize it all? Do you keep a notepad? Do you keep a phone note, or sure things pop up all the time at random spots?
Yeah, all the time. Even when I'm trying to sleep, I hear things, I see things, and I wake up. I've learned my lesson long ago that the original idea is never as good as the copy. So as soon as I think something, hear something, feel something, I write it down. I usually use my notes on my phone, but if I'm working on something, something else, I'm writing something and it pops in, I'm just going to write it down because the one thing I don't want is for it to transform into something that I didn't envision, right? We're trying to recreate it. And what was it that made me feel that way? And it never works. So I capture it right away. And then I keep a list of potential ideas. Now, they don't always flesh out and they're not all meant for this moment, but at some point, it's going to come up. So most of the movies I've done, that's what happens. I thought about something. I'm like, what if? And then that small what if becomes a big what if, right? And before you know it, you're putting together a whole script based on those ideas. So I keep organized that way. I keep a list of, probably right now I'm about 30 or 40 different scripts. So I keep a list of all of them and I keep adding on and I keep picking them off one by one. Okay, it's time. Let's get into this one. And it's just a thrill to even explore those new worlds. That makes me very happy.
That's awesome. That's awesome, man. And I asked you about writing comedic or funny earlier. As far as writing thrillers, how do you get into the psyche of that and make that translate to the audience?
I think it's two sides of the same coin. Your what would you do in this thriller situation, right? So you're thinking about, okay, what is something that I find either scary, thought provoking, dramatic, emotional. Um, what is something that makes me feel that way? When I hear a noise outside, what is it that makes me look out the window? If I saw someone running down the street, that's the beginning of something, right? I don't know what it's going to turn into, but it's a real human thing that turns into a thriller. We're all walking in comedy. We're all walking in thrillers. We just don't know what character we're playing, right? We
Yes.
could be the lead, we could be the extra, we could be a variety of things. So what we have to look at is what role do I play, and then I transition that. If I want to write a script about that, I could write the person running. I could write me looking out the window. I could write me looking through the window and seeing the neighbor looking through the window and what is it, what do they know and what do I know and how does that dissect. And then the trickier part is how do you use that concept and turn it into a full-fledged 80, 90 to 120 page script. And then how do you make that a visual medium so people can watch it, understand it, and it's a full story? So having cool ideas for thrillers, love it. But can you actually make a whole movie out of it that has a beginning, a middle, a end, a point, concepts, diversity of thought, interest? That's kind of the way I look at it. But there's so many ideas out there. The world is just an idea. idea factory. So I'm always thinking of something, right? Real things, real people, realistic situations, unreal um, outcomes that makes it unique.
And that's interesting to think about that. You mentioned the scripts. I never thought about this, but for if I'm watching a movie, a general movie that's say 90 minutes, 2 hours, how long is that script? How long is the actual pages? For the writer, the act, the talent, and things like that.
Well,
For it to air.
typically they say the general rule is a page per minute. That's not always accurate because I could write me and you went to the store and someone pulled out a weapon. I could write that. That's not going to be that short, right? Or a dialogue scene it could take a lot longer in the writing than it does in the film. If we're having a conversation, that could be 10 pages. It's not going to last 10 minutes. But on average, when you're balancing the dialogue and you're balancing that action, it should be about a page per minute. So that's where you see scripts are generally going to be on the short end, 70 minutes, which would lead an hour and 10 minutes to 2 hours, which is 120 pages. So that's kind of how you calculate that. But one thing that I do not do is I don't write towards a number.
Yep.
I just create. I just write. And
Yep.
when it's done, then it's done because you're trying to fill pages, then you're adding fat and it's not allowing you to truly be efficient in your creativity.
Got it. Got it. No, that's illuminating. I never thought about that, and now you got me wondering how long these scripts are. Tell us about Fighting Olympus. Tell us about the film and just what the idea, the plot, and everything is, and just illuminate it for us.
Sure. Fighting Olympus it's an action crime drama. It's pretty unique. So it's really about two brothers who are members of a SWAT team. And after some challenges, the brothers look to retire. One takes on another career path. Um, and the uniqueness of the film is one of the brothers ends up getting kidnapped by this cult. Okay, and the cult is based off of Greek mythology. So and then the other brother has to go rescue his brother from this cult, and it gets deeper and deeper and deeper. So you're thinking about all of those different mythological figures that you may have heard of or watched in other movies, but now they're real people. So again, you're having these unreal situations, but real people playing the role. So it has action, it has fighting, it has a lot of heart. Characters are not two dimensional; they're very three dimensional. Every single person not only has an agenda, but they also have something that made them who they are. And you get to understanding, how did Medusa become Medusa? How did Ares become Ares? What are these different characters and how does one man go to the depths to try to save his brother and meeting all of these people? So if you think of the standard adventure, this is an adventure with a twist. Again, you have this amazing SWAT team leader that has to somehow use not only his fighting ability, not only his ability with weapons, but he has to use his mind and outsmart this whole cult to go save his brother. And it also speaks to one thing that I love is how far we're willing to go to save our family. And would you go to the depths to save your family? So there's some supernatural elements in it, but if If you love action, if you love drama, if you love, those standard crime movies, and if you love a lot of twist and deep characters, Fighting Olympus is just a joyride.
And if you if you could pat yourself on the back for a little bit, what awards has it won? 'Cause I've seen it's been pretty acclaimed.
Yeah, yeah. I can't think of the specific awards right now. We've been in a lot of festivals for different movies, but it did win an award in New York. Um, can't they? It was a award ceremony in Times Square. It did win a couple of awards in Texas. Some bigger festivals,
Yeah,
and that's just catapulted it because now people are looking out for it. They're watching it. They're enjoying the experience. So uh, the thing with writers and directors, appreciate it, appreciate the awards, then we're moving on,
yeah,
right? Like, all right, yeah, okay, actors, y'all go, y'all take as many pictures as you want. I got work to do, right? So
yeah.
I'm thankful. I'm so thankful for those awards, but a lot of work to do because the projects don't create themselves. We gotta put in the work.
It's true. And speaking of which, what are some things you have coming down the pike? I'm sure you got a lot of things you're juggling all at the same time, but anything you'd like to, kind of tell the audience as far as what you have in the next, say, 12 to 24 months? 'Cause I know it
I,
takes
I
a
Yeah, I can tell you what we have right now. We just this week released our newest movie. It's called The Fear of It. So you can watch that on Amazon.com. That's a thriller, crime thriller. It takes you behind what is the makeup of not only the detectives investing a case, but how does and why does a killer become a killer, right? So you get some behind the scenes. Why does a body transporter become a body transporter, and what are some of the pitfalls and emotional drain that comes with those roles? So it's a exciting story, but it also has a ton of humanity because you get to see that everything is not, as I mentioned before, two dimensional. You have people that you see what they are on the outside, but you never know what made them what they are. And it takes a peek behind the curtain so you can say, oh, I get it, right? I get how that person could become this person, and they're not just a maniacal bad guy. They're just like us, and things happen and they snap. And
gotcha.
so that's called The Fear of It. You can watch it on Amazon. Like I said, it just was released this week, and it'll be hitting so many other areas in the near future.
That's
Um,
all.
yeah. Besides that, we're in pre-production for a legal thriller, so that's also a different genre. But I'm looking forward to that too because it taps into more of an intellectual side, but also it's still putting people in these unreal situations. So I'm enjoying the ride for all of these movies that are coming out.
That's awesome. I can see the excitement in your
Oh,
face when you explain everything. Just you just living the dream and everything seemed so great. So that's awesome to hear. What inspired the fear of it? If I just get back to what was the genesis of it as far as the initial idea?
yeah, well, the genesis of it was I would watch some of these, like if you've ever watched uh, First 48, and you
Oh
see
yeah,
some of these roles, but you my mind doesn't just go into watching it. My mind goes into why did you choose that? And what about that guy over there? And what
yeah,
about, what made that person do that? I'm constantly trying to figure out what are the ingredients that led to this person becoming who they are. Why does a why does a detective that may have been so enthusiastic early on become grizzled, right? Become that, right? why why does it turn into that? Why haven't you been able to catch the criminal so soon when they're so close to you? So the genesis of it was really looking at what are the components that make these people who they are, and then building that into a story, because I'm fascinated with what you don't see. They show you, they go through the crimes, a lot of films and documentaries, they go through the crime, but they don't give you that what happens when the camera's off, right? What happens when you've seen so much pain outside of what's on at the crime scene? What happens to you when you go home? What
Yes.
happens when you're at your most vulnerable point? So for me, it was a way to have, one of those crime stories like Seven, like Zodiac, those type of stories, but take you a little bit further into what happens when the camera's off, when the lights are off, and you're all by yourself. And I think that's what made it such a unique experience. And in both of those movies, I had just some amazing talent to work with. Shout out to casting because they did their thing. Um,
Hmm.
and one thing that I have the privilege of is I get to throw out these crazy ideas, and then I get to work with a team to actually bring the vision uh, to life. And that's just one of the most fun things you can ever have. Just have an idea, and then before you know it, you're able to share that idea with everyone.
Yeah, that's awesome. And for most of our audience, probably doesn't have any idea about the casting process. But how do you get your talent? Just explain to a novice how that comes to be.
Sure, sure. Well, there's a number of websites that do have um, casting services, and really, what it is the talents there, and it's kind of a mutual selling. So when you're posting about about your project, you're trying to entice the cast to the ones you want to work with you. Same thing, they're trying to entice you to hire them by having their reel, so you can see all of the things they've done, their resumes, their pictures, and you can go through and look at all of the people that submit. So that's one way to do it. Another, you may have different Facebook groups or movie or actors groups that you can tap into. It is not easy. It's not easy. So think of it this way: it's not just finding a person that looks the part, because a lot of times it may not even be the look. Can they capture the spirit of what you're trying to project? Can you
Yeah.
capture that? Does it make sense? And it is such a struggle. So when you do connect that person to that role, it's like, yes, I got it, right. And it doesn't always happen. And the challenging thing is you have to wait for that person, because if you just pick somebody and hope for the best, then you're selling your film short. And it doesn't mean that all of the actors aren't amazing. They're talented. If I have an action and it's not an action comedy, I need someone that can convey that toughness, right? Whereas you might be good for my comedy or a buddy cop film, but you're not that person for this particular role. So you have to go through, and I think for Fighting Olympus, we probably had 2,500 or 3,000 um, submissions. It was something ridiculous like that. And these are all hungry people that are looking for an opportunity to share their talent. And so, what for your listeners, what the hard thing for me is, I so want everybody to reach their goals, and it's like I don't want to say no, but I got to, because it's just not working. And you have to, for the sake of the project, you have to be very, very strategic. You have to be engaged in the process, and you have to know when someone's not a fit for what you're trying to do. And there's nothing wrong with that, because actors are putting in and then they move on to the next thing to submit for. It's
Yeah,
just how it
good
works.
point. Good point. Good explanation. That's a good insight to, kind of behind the scenes how it, because we see the final product, but we
Yeah.
don't see how it came to be, how it's actually made. Um, what are your social channels? Where can the audience find your work? Where can they find you on social media?
Yeah, they can find me on Instagram, Vaughnworks LLC, VAUGHANWORKS LLC. Don't forget the A. You can find us on vaughnworks.com, VAUGHANWORKS.com. And you can also find us on Facebook. Same thing, Vaughnworks LLC on Facebook. And since the new film is coming out, you're going to get a lot of context, not only about the fear of it, not only about Fighting Olympus. We've probably won, I don't know, we've won a ton of awards for a film that's come out, Black Box, and we just were in the Flagstaff Film Festival showing it to a group, and got some great evaluations there. So there are projects continuing to come out. But it's just exciting. I just love creating and helping people achieve their goals and dreams of also being able to showcase their talents, and it's just a great opportunity.
And well, it's awesome, and just huge thanks for all the insight, just into the film writing process, the film making process. Very insightful, very entertaining, and enlightening. So, Julian, thanks for joining Adeptus on Air.
Oh, thank you for having me. I love the experience. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Adeptus on Air. If you like this episode, please subscribe and leave a review. The views and opinions by the podcast speakers and guests are solely their own and do not reflect the opinions of Adeptus. This podcast provides general information only and is not intended to constitute advice.